Hello, it's Scott Manley here. It's April 17th. It has been, well, a crazy week in spaceflight. It's time for some more deep space updates. And we rewind to April 6th, where we had a Falcon 9 launching 28 Starlinks from Slick 40, part of Starlink Group 6-72. The day later, on the 7th, we had another Falcon 9 launching from Vandenberg, Group 11-11. 8th of April, we had Soyuz MS-17 carrying Sergei Ryzhikov, Alexei Zubritsky, and Johnny Kim, who is, of course, one of these people that is constantly cited as being, like, how does he ever find the time to do anything? You know, Navy SEAL, doctor, engineer, astronaut. Yeah, he's going to the space station. He has some of the most badass photos, portraits taken beforehand, like that one of him in the EVA suit. Like, man. Yeah, so that is like going to be Expedition 72, 73. Obviously, they're going to bring the previous guys home. Don Pettit is coming home soon. He's had an amazing run. He's also the oldest astronaut in space right now. Now, the landing date is supposed to be April 20th, 420. And that is also Don Pettit's birthday, his 70th birthday. So he will be turning 70 on the day that he is coming home in a Soyuz capsule. And that sounds pretty crazy, but it's not even close to the craziest Soyuz flight that Don Pettit has ever experienced. Also in related news, NASA has announced that they've extended their seat exchange, seat barter agreement with Russia until 2027. That just means that there will be a NASA astronaut flying on Soyuz and a Russian cosmonaut flying on Dragon or Starliner. Yeah, right. But yeah, so obviously, yeah, that got to the space station, lots of celebration, bunch of, 10 people on orbit right now. On the 10th of April, we had Long March 3B/E launching TJS-17 into geosynchronous orbit. This is a Chinese classified military satellite, possibly an observation satellite, but not much information. But yesterday, Slingshot Aerospace, company that observes satellites in low Earth orbit, noticed that it had released a secondary payload after reaching geostationary orbit. So we don't know what it's up to, but, China doing stuff in space. 12th of April, America doing stuff in space. Falcon 9 launched NROL 192. It's a Starshield group launch. Group number 8, I think, from that program. A bunch of satellites into sun-synchronous orbit, part of their proliferated architecture mission. So this is number 9, I believe. It has 22 Starshield satellites for National Reconnaissance Office launched from Vandenberg. 13th of April, Falcon 9, another batch of Starlink 21 from Launch Complex 39A on the East Coast. 14th of April, day later, another Falcon 9, 27 Starlink going from Slick 40. And this was Booster 1067, the first one to fly for the 27th time. Finally, just yesterday, we had a Minotaur, a rocket that you don't often hear launching. A Minotaur with an Orion 38, which is the second stage. So Minotaur is actually a peacekeeper missile with a Pegasus-like upper stage and everything on top of it. This launched NROL 174 from Slick 8 at Vandenberg. The last time this launched at Vandenberg was 2011. That was before SpaceX had even made it to Vandenberg. That was when SpaceX had launched like 2 Falcon 9s to the space station. This was completely different world as opposed to what it is now. But yeah, there wasn't any live stream or anything. It was obviously super secret government mission. People were on hand in the area. They could see it from like a Halaima beach. And yeah, we got some nice footage from Vandenberg. Anyway, of course, the launch that happened in the last, few days ago on the 14th was a little space flight out of West Texas. New Shepard number 31, which was billed as the first all-women crewed space mission. And I would say technically no, because of course Valentina Tereshkova flew on her own on Vostok 6. And also, I'm not sure they qualify as crew. Some people say they don't qualify as astronauts. But look, I'm going to give them credit. I think that part of this mission was to inspire people around the world. And if you're inspiring people around the world, and inspiring women around the world, you want to have inspiring people like Katy Perry. Yes, I'm sure as she was floating around in space, she felt like she was a plastic bag floating on the wind, ready to start again. Yeah. Also on the mission, we had Aisha Bo, who's an aerospace engineer, worked in NASA, founded engineering educational companies. Carrie Ann Flynn, filmmaker, she actually had previously bought a ticket to fly on Virgin Galactic back in 2011. 14 years later, still hasn't flown. Now Blue Origin has done that. Gail King, who is a CBS morning, television host or whatever. Amanda Nguyen, Vietnamese American, and she was a NASA intern as well. So again, we've sort of got some people that have some connections to justify them being on a space flight. Katy Perry, obviously. I don't have a problem. I like Katy Perry. I mean, I also like death metal and weird techno, but Katy Perry I'm down with. And finally, Lauren Sanchez, who is like a sort of journalist. Interestingly, she has, in her past, her first TV cameo role outside of her newscasting was as a news anchor on Babylon 5. So yeah, we had William Shatner on an early flight. Now we have someone that's a background character in Babylon 5. She's also a pilot, by the way. Helicopter pilot, which makes her braver than me, and gonna get married to Jeff Bezos, who was excitedly turning up at the landing. And there was some interesting stuff where the recording of the landing was taken down as soon after the broadcast, and then reposted with certain sections missing, including Jeff running around the capsule and falling into a ditch. But that's fine. I hope I'm in as good shape as him when I'm his age. And then there's this whole staged thing where you see him opening the capsule door to bring everybody out. And that was great, except that they actually were opening the capsule from the inside and then were told to close the door so that, they didn't want to ruin the moment. Look, I'm hoping that Jeff has a wonderful time, getting married to his other half. And I hope that she flies him around in helicopters and the helicopters are good. I mean, it was weird, right? Because we also had all these celebrities and stuff at the site. Oprah Winfrey and the Kardashians getting interviewed. There's been a lot of spirited discussion about the use of the term astronaut and whether it's appropriate to apply it to people who flew on a suborbital flight and didn't have any actual crew activities. And people are trying to slice and dice the exact definition to try and include and exclude different groups of people. And the problem is we have a whole lot of history already where we've established who's an astronaut and not, and who isn't. Some people say, well, they should perhaps only do it if they went into orbit. Well, technically, Yuri Gagarin didn't complete an orbit, and Alan Shepard definitely didn't, do a complete orbit. So, do you exclude them? How about excluding people that didn't do anything directly to control the spacecraft? Well, again, Yuri Gagarin, he sat there and he didn't do anything. He was locked out of the controls, and sure, yes, he could have opened that up if he'd punched in the code. And then you've got Gail King trying to compare what she did against Alan Shepard. And there's no way that these are in any way the same way. Alan actually had a lot of work to do when he was flying the spacecraft. It would have flown automated without him, right? He was operating as a test pilot. He was taking notes. On the other hand, Gail didn't pee herself, so she has that over Alan. So look, there's been a lot of stuff said about this, and not all of it good, but on the balance, I am all for more people going into space. I would rather have a bunch of overly excited Katy Perry fangirls talking about her being a super astronaut than a bunch of flat earthers telling me that it's all fake, right? I mean, sure, I'd like a sort of medium where we're talking about good science, but frankly, space tourism exists so everyone can go to space. And if there's even one person that decides to be an aerospace engineer because of this, great, we have won. Humanity is better. And there's a whole bunch of other people that can go to space before then. I'll honestly, I'm saying it now, I won't be surprised if we see the cast of Wicked flying in space and singing Defying Gravity or something. You know that's going to happen, right? You know that somebody's asked about it. Anyway, moving forwards, we're talking about space tourism, actually. NASA has announced another solicitation for private astronaut missions to the International Space Station. And there's one important change to this. Now, previously, all the Axiom missions to the space station had to have a former NASA astronaut on board that had commanded the space station, right? Now those criteria are being relaxed. They're still going to need to have a former astronaut on board, but they no longer need to be a NASA astronaut. They could be an ESA astronaut, a Canadian Space Agency astronaut, Japan. And Koichi Wakata and Tim Peake are both heavily involved with Axiom, so they could potentially command a future flight. And we have heard talk of Britain sending in all British crew to the space station, and Tim Peake would have to command that. So there's room for this now to happen. Okay, in business, there's a company called Etherflux, which has raised a bunch of money, like $50 million. I think it started by a guy that, again, might have a background in cryptocurrency, maybe not. But space-based solar power, it's such a no-brainer that we were looking at it in the 1970s and it was sort of doable. Now it's even more doable. I would love to see this very much become a thing, putting giant solar panels in orbit and beaming the power down wirelessly. Yeah, it's like $50 million Series A funding. It's all, local. I mean, I'm not saying that space-based solar power is absolutely something that's going to happen that will, shape the future of on-orbit operations. But I think that there's enough interesting problems there and enough market potential that people investigating are probably doing a good job investing their money. And worst comes to the worst, there's definitely going to be needs for the kind of massive solar panels that are needed for other industries, even if we're not interested in beamed power. Just because you're not beaming the power back to the Earth doesn't mean that there's not a use for all the technology you're developing. Another piece of technology that was unveiled in the last couple of weeks was a Scout. So Leo Labs, you might know, they are a Bay Area company that use ground-based radars to track satellites, space debris and stuff in orbit. And they unveiled a mobile version, a truck that they can drive to a critical location, deploy one of their phased array antenna, and track, stuff going up. I mean, for example, wouldn't it be great to drive one of these out to the Caribbean if there was going to be maybe another Starship launch that might go wrong and create a debris swarm? That would be a fascinating place to have one. But yes, vote of confidence or something there. One person that does appear to have a significant vote of confidence, and I mentioned sort of a couple of weeks ago this was happening, Jared Isaacman. He finally got his time before the Senate, before the politicians that would have to basically vote on him. And I'm going to say that between his, visiting with people, figures beforehand and this, I think that he's definitely going to go in, right? Now, there were a few interesting moments in this. I mean, for example, it was clear to me that, so there were astronauts from Artemis 2 there, right? So NASA astronauts, Canadian astronaut. It was also the crew of both the previous missions that Jared Isaacman led. So we had like the three crew from Polaris Dawn and Inspiration 4. And the politicians that were doing the questioning, some of them didn't seem to understand the difference between NASA astronauts and these private astronauts. And I'm not dissing the private astronauts, because everyone I've met, they are all awesome people. You guys are awesome. But there was a definite language that seemed to suggest that they didn't understand the difference. I thought that was funny. But what the committee was really interested in repeatedly was, are we going to cancel SLS? Right? And obviously, Jared kept on saying, well, it seems like, I'm not in NASA yet, so I can't make that decision. But it seems like if we want to get to the moon quickly, that's the best way to go. Ted Cruz also brought out this, what will 2030 look like poster? And it's like one half was China on the moon and the left hand was, the US on the moon.
Woman will step foot on the moon and she will be an American astronaut. Do we have your commitment that we will win the race to the moon and China will not beat us?
Senator, I only see the left-hand portion of that poster.
I only see America on the moon, which, we're going to have China on the moon as well. It's just America's going to be there first. I hope. But he also made these statements about, moon is also on the way to Mars.
I think we can absolutely do that. We can figure out the space economy in low Earth orbit. We can run more scientific missions. This is the agency that went from sending Alan Shepard on a suborbital mission, and 8 years later, we saw Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin on the surface of the moon. Do I think that we can get back to the moon, chart a course for Mars, and do all the other things? Absolutely, Senator.
So yeah, there was a quote from Jared, something along the lines of NASA having to do more with less. We'll have more rovers, more space missions, more science. And that would be great, except a couple of days later, we had the White House budget proposal. And this is the proposal. This is what gets sent to NASA so NASA can start figuring out what it might need to cut. This will still go to Congress, and Congress will say, we don't like that, we want to change it, because Congress ultimately have the purse strings. They are ultimately going to control this. Now, this White House budget is an absolute disaster, right? It's cutting 20% of NASA's budget, and it's almost exclusively cutting it from the actual useful, important stuff that NASA does that SpaceX doesn't do. I know there's a lot of people out there that says NASA needs to get out of the launch business and we need to cut out that rubbish money going to SLS. It's not worth it. And so definitely I'm feeling that the money spent on SLS does not reflect what we get from it. But if you're thinking this is a good budget because NASA is overspending on this, then you're going to be very disappointed, because this budget is not cutting SLS at all. It is cutting the science. It's cutting almost everything. Like, a lot of this stuff is hitting the Goddard Space Flight Center, which is really like a place that manages a lot of missions. One notable example is the Nancy Grace Roman Telescope, which is getting ready to launch next year. It has no budget, so they're wanting to basically take this and put it in a warehouse after having built it up for all this time. Mars sample return, cut. Da Vinci, that's a mission to Venus, cut completely. Like heliophysics, earth physics, astronomy, all heavily cut. And it's not clear that this is good. This really leaves much for NASA, because NASA still has to spend all this ridiculous amount of money on SLS. But again, look, the truth is that this money, this whole budget has to go through Congress. Congress is going to protect what it wants, and it's going to make sure money is still there. And there are senators that are in Maryland, where the Goddard Space Flight Center is, and they're going to fight for this, and they're going to pull in deals, and they're going to get some of this money restored. I don't think we're going to get an increase in the NASA budget. I think we're going to see a decrease in the NASA budget. And NOAA, by the way, they also got a big budget cut in their proposal. They obviously put a lot of satellites up, weather satellites and things like that. Anyway, yes, so SLS is still protected. Artemis 2 is still going ahead. It is stacking right now in the last few weeks. We've seen the core booster get mated with the solid rocket motor, so it's starting to look like a rocket. We've had the payload adapter, or whatever, the second stage adapter installed. The ICPS has just rolled into the assembly building, and they're going to stack that later. So this is getting ready it's really starting to look like a rocket that will carry people around the moon in the next, next year. It'd be nice if they would do it a little faster, but whatever. Now, unlike NASA and NOAA, we don't have any visibility into Space Force's budget plans for the coming year, but we do have a new document that they just published titled Space Warfare, a framework for planners. And this is perhaps the best indication for how Space Force sees itself going forwards. So it's like it's practically an explicit blueprint on how they aim to defend American space resources and satellites, and possibly take aim at potentially hostile space systems in the event of conflicts. It's not it doesn't go into any great details on specific systems, but it does basically say, we are war fighters, we need to think about how war will be fought in space. And obviously people have thought about this for a while, but they need to make it more part of Space Force and how it will operate in the future high frontier, the high ground that is space. There's a whole lot of military speak in this document, and not a lot of details, but it does definitely give you an idea of the direction that Space Force feels that it needs to go in the current climate. After that whole discussion of politics and women flying to space, I'm sure the comment section is an absolute disaster but right now. Let's just go look at bigger things, right? The James Webb Space Telescope has published spectral data which suggests that an exoplanet may have dimethyl sulfide or maybe dimethyl disulfide, which on Earth is primarily produced by biological processes, right? It is a big universe. There may be abiotic processes that actually produce this. So this is an exoplanet called K2-18b, and it was discovered in like 2015 by NASA's Kepler mission. It's around an M-dwarf star, 124 light years away. The planet itself is maybe 2.5 times the diameter of Earth and probably about 8 to 9 times the mass. It is a sub-Neptune, but it is right in the middle of the habitable zone. The radiation flux, the thermal light that comes from that star is roughly equivalent to what we get on Earth. So this is one of these places that's a perfect candidate for looking for atmospheric life signatures in the atmosphere. It's had a lot of work done on it. We've seen evidence of water, carbon dioxide, ammonia, methane. And this possible detection, which could well be ruled out by other data, possible detection is one of the more interesting and complicated molecules because it is strongly associated with life. So maybe one day, we will have some evidence there is life in space. Again, maybe we'll have Jodie Foster going out there. We should have sent a poet. No, instead we're going to send Katy Perry, right? This is just like a fascinating story to follow, and it's just going to be one of many because JWST is going to have more and more candidates and more time, and we're going to get closer. We're going to get more details, and maybe one day we will have that truth. So anyway, looking forward to the next few days. We're going to get Firefly launching their Alpha rocket from Vandenberg, hopefully in the next couple of days. Launch has been delayed a few times, but apparently it's ready to go. But I think more interestingly, on Sunday, 4/20, we have Lucy spacecraft is going to fly by the asteroid Donald Johanson, and we'll get the first look at that asteroid. Another, interplanetary flyby is always going to be interesting. Of course, it'll take a couple of days to get the data back, but I expect by the time we see the next one, we're going to have some cool pictures of a new asteroid up close. I'm Scott Manley. Fly safe.